And welcome to I can't tell. Wow. Out of practice. Hey. Totally botched that. Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Rachel Heine. I'm back in the Nerdist office, and I'm missing my co-hosts IRL, but they're here on the internet, Maude, Garrett, and Hector Navarro. Hi. Hello.
Hi, I'm pulling up the YouTube, so wait for the noise to just go, blah. Oh, it auto-muted.
Oh, wow. That's a gift from past you to current you.
Yeah.
I love when that happens.
So, Rich, I have a question. You're in the office, IRL. Do you have access to wine or any kind of a drink? Because if not, that's okay. You're in the office. I get it.
No, I actually just totally forgot this morning. As you both know, and as longtime viewers will know from book club, we drank wine in the office. Let's just say that. But I forgot this morning, so I'm drinking water in my office goth mug.
Very nice. I've got a beer here. This is a North Coast Brewing Company Scrimshaw, which is pretty tasty. It's a Pilsner style beer, so I like it. It's good. Ma, do you drinking anything? Water?
I got my claws, but this is a brand new flavor, strawberry. So I'm.
Why'd you say that weird? Why did you pronounce that weird?
I didn't. Why did you spit your beer up?
I feel like you're in your head a little bit about it. Because right before we started, I said I love how you shared with us that flavor, and I said I love how Australians pronounce strawberry. It's different than American. Yeah, it's nice. And I said you tend to kind of downplay the straw syllable and go right to the berry, which is nice. Whereas Americans sound like slack-jawed yokels. We're like, strawberry. I like strawberry.
Slack-jawed yokel just makes me think of the
Cletus?
Is it Cletus? The Cletus theme song?
We've got so much to talk about with this book, so I'm going to kind of snip and tangents a little bit now. We only get one episode a month.
I know, we do. We have time to discuss. So for everyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know what some of your favorite books are, what genres you like to read. Introduce yourselves. We want to get to know you. Everyone else, thank you for joining us again. We missed you. Once a month is not enough, but we're going to talk about the book that we read this month. If you haven't read it yet or you fell off, that's okay. We're still going to talk about a bunch of stuff that hopefully you enjoy, and let's get into it. But we are discussing Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. That is what we read. Happy Pride, y'all. Happy Pride. It's still Pride.
Happy Pride.
Yes. And this is Cemetery Boys. But I'm sorry, I've been in meetings all day. I'm like all over the place. But Maude, would you do us the honors and break down the synopsis for us?
Sure can. Yadriel has summoned a ghost, and now he can't get rid of him. When his traditional Latinx family has problems accepting his gender, Yadriel becomes determined to prove himself a real Brujo. With the help of his cousin and best friend, Maritza, I'll get there. He performs a ritual himself, and then he sets out to find the ghost of his murdered cousin and set it free. However, the ghost he summons is actually Julian Diaz, the school's resident bad boy, and Julian is not about to go quietly into death. He's determined to find out what happened and tie up some loose ends before he leaves. Left with no choice, Yadriel agrees to help Julian so that they can both get what they want. But the longer that Yadriel spends with Julian, the less he wants him to leave.
I just want to say, points across the board for those pronunciations. That was fantastic. I didn't listen to the audiobook, so even I'm reading it, and in my head, I've got Yadriel, but I've got Julian in my head. So
actually, I really want to, that's one of the first things I want to talk about, because the narrator, who is a trans man, but also Hispanic and speaks fluent Spanish, I believe Hispanic or Mexican, says Julian during the book. But then in a post-book interview with the author, a trans man who is Spanish, they say, or he says, Julian. And so one of the things that I really want to talk about is, and we'll get there, but the use of language and saying words differently, like the Julian versus Julian, both of them kind of being okay, depends who says it. But even though it's not like it all falls under the same umbrella. And another one is Latinx. So online, I've noticed that even Latinx, like that's a newish term to kind of help with exactly what we're talking about, because the Spanish language is very much gender specific.
Oh, yeah.
So when you look at the trans and non-binary, it's like, well, you have to fit into one or another, which is what we really explore in this book. But so Latinx was created for that. But now apparently the next step, because language evolves so quickly, is from what I'm hearing, Latin.
Oh,
I think it's Latine.
Latine.
Because the E wouldn't be silent in
You're
Spanish.
right. I'm Maude. Yeah. So Latine. So it's a gender neutral term because a lot of Spanish speakers do not really associate with the Latinx side of it.
Well, and I think the E, from what I've also heard from having conversations about it semi-recently, I don't remember who I was talking to, but is that the Latine versus Latinx makes more sense within the structure of the language and the way that Spanish normally operates. But I think it's also, your mileage may vary depending on who you are and how you speak that language. But I do think it's, not just the language itself of Spanish, or, a lot of French, Spanish, and Italian, pretty gendered language.
Yeah.
But also culturally, also looking at Catholicism. And I thought, why don't we say just briefly how we felt about the book, and then we can kind of dive in, because I think there's a lot to explore here.
Great.
And folks in the chat are also pointing out German language has masculine, feminine, and neutral word association. And Stargirl, very good point. Spanish was only used with Julian's dad. That's how I heard it in my head. So maybe he chose for an English pronunciation, because we have that really sweet moment where he basically thinks of
Julian.
So he might be kind of but it's interesting. And I think in previous books, maybe it was a Star Wars book, where the audiobook the pronunciation doesn't necessarily match up with the author's intent, because you can't really control every single part of the narration. But Hector, let's start with you. What did you think overall of this book?
Overall thoughts is I was really impressed with this book. There were things that I didn't love about it, but there were things that I really loved about it. And when I was done, I thought that the ending was very satisfactory, and I liked the way that things kind of wrapped up. But it made me, it made me think about a lot of different types of stories, and I think that we can get into some of the things I didn't love about the book. But like I was telling you guys right before we started, I thought it was really, really cute and really charming, and that the main focus of the book was successful, and that the main focus was this kind of relationship and turned into a romance between these two kids, between Yads and Julian. And I thought that the book focusing on that, I think, was successful. There's other stuff kind of on the peripheral that I was like, oh, maybe we could have focused more on that, and and that kind of thing. But the other thing I'll say to kind of wrap up how I felt about the story is that, well, first of all, me and YA. I listen, it's at the end of the day, it's YA. I roll my eyes a little bit at some of that stuff, and some of the stuff that maybe like a typical YA audience, and especially young people, that they care about, I don't necessarily care about. I'm a dude in my approaching
there wasn't a makeover scene.
There was not a makeover scene, but there was, but there was a lot of the classic sort of like, well, we're cute, we're teens, maybe we're gonna kiss, and I'm kind of like, there's a dead body, you gotta, like, let's go, boys, let's go, let's kiss and go. We gotta.
Were you ever a teen?
Passion dash.
The most important.
So to sort of sum up, I think my takeaway for this is that I really dug so many different aspects of it, even if I didn't quite love the sort of complete package altogether, that I was thinking to myself, this would make a fantastic live action adaptation. And while I was thinking about that, I was like, oh man, I would love to see this in a movie format or even a TV show format. And if it were to be adapted, I think that other elements of the storyline could kind of just be expanded upon to kind of make me a little bit more like, make me feel like maybe things maybe clicked and kind of connected just a bit more. Whereas basically the relationship between the two lead characters, Yadriel and this this teenage boy ghost that he gets stuck with, that was all solid throughout the story. So it's like, it's the other stuff that I can kind of pick apart and talk about and get excited about and want to expand, and some of the mythology and some of the cool like Brujex lore that I was like really, really into. And at times I wish that there was kind of more of, but then at the end of the day, it was all about Yads and Julian. And I think that worked. So all in all, very impressive. I'm very, very happy and excited for Aiden Thomas, this being his first book.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where I'm like, cool. What's next? What else you got? What's book number 2? What, how is
coming? I think it's out. Yeah. I put it on my to read list. Yeah.
Totally. How's the style going to change? And how's the, so it is exciting also to jump into a first time author's first sort of major work, and feel like we're here at the ground floor, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen? What's their career going to be next? And will something that they worked on like get picked up to be adapted into a movie or TV show, and then kind of blow them up at the author level? And then where can we go from there? So the cool thing is there's so much to talk about in this book, the making of the book. We are going to cut ourselves a little short, really only giving us an hour today, or a little more than an hour, but like really impressed. And again, 5 stars for those pronunciations, Maude. Real, because it's tough in this. There's some tough ones in this story.
Yeah, agreed. Maude, before you go, very quickly, just want to say welcome, Steve. Steve just introduced themselves in the chat. I'm Steve. I like the Vampire Chronicles and the Night Lord series. You are in good company. And cool. Welcome. And then Game Wizard also pointed out Julian, his nickname Jules wouldn't translate well with a Hispanic pronunciation. So
Jules. Yeah. Again, look, the Julian thing feels like it's something I related to, and maybe even didn't like subconsciously didn't even realize, but like my family calls me Hector, and me, born and raised in the United States and growing up, I'm Hector. So, and my language that I think in is English, and I speak a little bit and understand a little bit of Spanish. So like Julian probably has both of those in his life, and that's part of his existence, that to family he's Julian, and to his like friends
chosen
at high school
family,
and chosen family, it's Julian and stuff. So
Jules,
and the nickname Jules. Yeah.
I have the same thing, my name's Maude, but then I moved to America and my name is now Maude.
Sorry. Yeah.
And the last name's Garrett, and now it's Garrett.
Who's called
Strawberry?
Maude Garrett.
Deep bayou folks are you talking?
Yeah.
What did you think?
So I will admit that, this book is not for me. It's not written for me. It is not when you look at the checklist of, talking about a Mexican supernatural culture, that's not me. When you talk about sort of like the story of, being a trans boy, that's not me. When you talk about being sort of like in the classist and culture sort of shocks and trying to navigate, that's not me. And so I'm so glad this book's not for me, because every other fucking book is for me. And I love that I'm reading something and other people are able to be like, finally a book for me. And hearing the narrator and the author have a chat about that, and the narrator almost like tearing up, being like, this book was so powerful for me and I understand these moments. I was like, yay, finally. Because, with all the marketing inside of things, when you pitch a book to a publisher, they'll be like, no one will read this, or like, there's too few people that this falls in line with. So I love that we are now writing stories that aren't for everyone, but someone like me who doesn't understand most of this, and anytime they use Spanish, I didn't know what the word was. I got mi amor and that was it. But like I'm here going, all right, it's not sticking, but I'm committing. And I'm really glad I did, because the first half of the book was tough for me. I wasn't understanding the references. It was an information overload, but it was done in a way where like I just wasn't captivated. I couldn't connect with any character. I noticed that in the narration, it's Aiden Thomas's first book. So this is the first time we're writing. And I believe that it was the narrator's first time narrating as well.
Wow.
And I could tell about the firsts. So I could tell the sentence structure and introducing characters and information and how it was done. I could tell that in the writing that was new and not sort of like polished or defined. And then in the narrations, I could tell that was a little raw as well for me. The narrator would at times talk as if they were talking about a fairy tale. So it's like they had to go outside. Then they looked around and this is what they saw. And I'm like, same sort of thing with Hector. It's like I felt like I was being spoken down to at times instead of sort of like being spoken in like sharing a story. And that really kind of was difficult for me to push through in that first half of the book. But in saying that, when we did the last book that we did, Princess of Mars, I really struggled with the narrator for that one as well, putting on that southern twang and saying warrior. So
well, listen, if there was a Disney 3D version of Cemetery Boys, I would have had y'all over. We would have seen it at my house.
Not Disney.
It would have been awesome. Not Disney.
I don't trust Disney with
Disney's not ready for this yet. They're not ready for this. But that would have been a little bit of a different experience. I'm glad that that there was at least a Princess of Mars movie to watch to help, because I know Maude was struggling with that. Because it's so, it's even from 1912 or whatever. It's such a different era. But this is contemporary fantasy, which is good. But Maude, continue. Your overall thoughts.
I remember being at times just not excited to have to continue listening to this book, and then it changed. And something just clicked. I was a little bit like Hector as well, where I'm like, hey, you've set the mish, you're ignoring the mission. We've got this unlikable character that's joining. And like, I didn't like how Maritza was written. I felt like she was a very annoying Hermione that didn't actually provide enough substance or layers to her. It was just like her role was there to be the nag. And I think that could have been written a little bit better. But then when the connection between Yadriel and Jules kind of, flourishes and you can see that respect, and when that sort of grows, even though like Hector, I was like, your cousin has passed away. Right. Like, you don't forget about that being like, wow, there's dimples. Like for me, I kind of felt like there should have been a little bit more intertwining. Like we find out a little bit more about the information whilst having these moments and connecting that a little bit more. But for me, it was like, oh, here we go. Boom. The last quarter of this book was fantastic. I really liked it. It was worth the read for me. Even though I'm probably going to give it a 3.5 out of 5, I was absolutely invested in the last part of that. It did activate the feels. I loved that amount of supernatural kind of like final battle sort of feel.
That was cool.
Like it kind of had like a Rebels kind of feel with it, where it's like the twist and like it was so visual, and I was like, wow. But I agree. And I think, a big general consensus from this is that we want to see it in some sort of live action capacity. And I love the fact that it's going to continue growing. And like a lot of authors that we've read, like Leigh Bardugo, whose first trilogy, we were like, it's just finding her feet. And then after that, these books sort of fire off. I'm really excited for Aiden Thomas to really flex with writing.
Yeah, I agree. Just real quick before, Rachel, you tell us your overall thoughts. Maude, as you were describing it, you made me think of another thing that I thought of while reading it. I was looking for different soundtracks, and I tried a bunch of different movies and TV shows to kind of listen to while I was reading it. But I ended up sort of settling on Stranger Things because it gave me similar vibes of like, maybe not as young, but like teenage characters kind of, they don't have a car and they have to go on this adventure and they have to deal with school BS, but like they just need to get out of school and go and look for a missing person in a mystery, and it's supernatural and all that kind of thing. And I think that one of the things I was, unfortunately sort of comparing it to was like in Stranger Things, in those seasons, mostly they've done a good job of like giving you the kid focused, young person focused story, and then what the adults are doing and kind of what they're focusing on. And then it ends up kind of intertwining and weaving together, like sort of by the end of a Stranger Things season, you know what I mean? And so
sorry.
I was just going to say, no, go ahead, Maude.
The key component that you're missing with the Stranger Things analogy, you've definitely got the supernatural part of it, and the fact that they're kids and they're all learning and there's feelings involved and they're like navigating that. There is a show that I watched and binged at the start of COVID last year called On the Block, and it follows 3 high school kids that live in sort of like your East LA sort of setting where they have to navigate high school together, and it's 2 boys and 1 girl. The girl is black and the 2 boys are Mexican. Yeah. And you really delve into sort of like that triangle. 2 of them have feelings for each other, but they're going through these real culture changes. One of them gets messed up in like his brother's in a gang, and I was like, ooh, you know. The other times they're doing their traditional celebrations and holidays, and I think that for me, on the block, I got real on the block vibes for that, and so it's like that's how I saw it, and it actually really helped me visualize this book and try to connect me to it more. Yeah,
because you don't have the background of the backdrop of it being East LA. I still grew up in San Diego, but I still was close enough. I mean, Rachel, you're a Angelino. So like those kinds of like descriptions and you know, touchstones, it's like, yep, okay, got it, going on. So I think that to go off of what Maude was saying earlier and to bring back that Stranger Things analogy, like I liked and was interested in a lot of the adult characters, and on some level almost wish like I wish we had more of them, or following more of like they're also looking for their nephew or cousin or this, you know, this missing member of the family. But again, it's like basically what it boils down to is like I was so interested in the world that I basically just wanted more of each of the elements. And I think that the element that we got the most of and was the most successful, again, was that romance between Yads and Julian. And I thought it paid off really well. So yeah, I was thinking Stranger Things. I was thinking while reading this, I was thinking too, like an issue that could help with, so sometimes I struggled a little bit with the pacing because Aiden Thomas was slowing everything down, and he was like, this is what this means culturally. This is what's here in this house as we walk into this house, you know, and all that stuff is necessary stuff. But I think that if it was adapted into a TV show or a movie, that stuff would be the background details. And it's like, let's keep going with the urgency of the mission. You know what I mean? It's a story that almost takes place in real time because like it starts and we're like 2 days away from Dia de los Muertos, and they only have those 2 days to do a certain thing. And so I like that urgency at the beginning, but then there was definitely moments of the story where it's like, we're just hanging out. We got to slow down. You know, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I was kind of like, yeah, but again, the stakes are really, really high. And it's that Julian is dead and we don't know how or why. And it may have something to do with their cousin Miguel, I think was the cousin's name. And so I was really invested in that, and was sometimes being like, oh, well, here comes the YA stuff. Okay. All right.
But also for the clock racing, you know, if the spirit stays a spirit and, you know, doesn't move on for too long, it turns into, you know,
Maligno.
and like, and that is another sort of like race against the clock thing. And you're right. It went, first gear. Let's put all of that on hold. We're going to provide the urgency and then forget the urgency. And I feel like if they could just have combined that a little bit. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah.
Counterpoint. No, I totally get what y'all are saying. I read this book in like 2 days and really enjoyed it and just zipped through it. Someone in the chat said that they were protective of their graveyard gays, and now that's all I ever want to call these sweet boys. I honestly felt like this, you know, I think there are different types of YA, and there's sort of like adult or like new adult, which is kind of broaches into, you know, late teens through 20s, 30s, and a lot of what I think Maude and I like in that vein is kind of in that genre. But this is for, you know, for kids and teens. And I think that I just fell in love with all of the characters. And I honestly felt like they were real people. And yes, I grew up in LA, and I grew up going to Dia de los Muertos with my cousins when I was a kid downtown. And
What's
so
that?
You've seen Coco, Maude? You've seen Coco?
Not yet.
You haven't?
Everyone says you're gonna cry, and I'm like, I have to be in a mood to
storm
cry.
out of his own home.
Can we see it in 3D?
Protest. Oh, can we watch it in 3D?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Perfect. I'm ready to cry because that movie wrecked me.
I have to be in a mood to cry.
I get it,
and I'm never in a mood.
But
it's tough. It's a hardcore
it's so
crying
beautiful.
movie from Pixar. But
I will watch Coco. I promise.
Having seen Coco. Yeah, okay. Pink your promise. We're in. You guys will come over. Everybody will come over, and we'll do Coco in 3D, and we'll cry. And the good news is when you have 3D glasses on, it hides your tears.
Good point.
Good point. So, like, I'm blown away that you read this without having seen Coco, because, like, I have some background info. My parents I'm Mexican. I have some of that. You know, some of these words, like, I understood as I'm reading through it. I had to look up a few.
I looked up a few
slang words and different things here. Don't start with that, Nerdist. Don't start with that. But like, I almost feel, and this is not a knock on Cemetery Boys, but it's almost like a compliment to like attaching itself to a really important pop culture thing, which is like, I feel like Coco is required viewing and then read Cemetery Boys, especially if you're not Mexican. You poor women, you poor Australian woman, Maude, that had to read this without that background knowledge, because Coco is, I think, the most succinct and like, mainstream and easily digestible like explanation of what Dia de los Muertos is and how it differs from Halloween.
The Day of the Dead in Spanish. So what they're talking about.
De los Muertos.
So when they're talking about Day of the Dead and his mom coming back and they're getting ready for that's what it's called in Spanish. And so I also want to call out Clever Girl said, that they taught middle school, and that was sort of the vibe that I got as well. I totally understand why both of you, that was your read on it. For me, because Yadriel was so cautious and so struggling with his sense of self and his place in his community, and feeling almost trying to be invisible because of his experiences so far. And also, he wants to go to college. He wants to prove himself. And so for me, I thought, I probably would be like, let's ditch. We got to solve this murder. But I didn't think that he would do that. And so for those moments gave us a lot more intimacy between the characters, just in terms of them getting to know each other. But yeah, they felt like people I knew in middle school almost. And I really loved the dynamic. I thought also the dialogue between the characters felt really natural to me. Like they had distinct voices, and I, was like laughing along with them as they were teasing each other, and they just melted my heart. I loved them. And obviously I love spooky stuff too, but it was, for me, as someone who has a hard time visualizing things in my head, it was very, very evocative. And I really enjoyed, even though, I don't know every specific thing about, like, I'm not a Day of the Dead expert by any stretch. I've been around it as a kid, but I think that having all of the food described and all of the different kind of elements of this huge cultural, religious, magical, in this sense, magical realist event, that it just added to the experience for me. I have a question for y'all, because some people in the chat were saying what happened with me. Did you guess the ending?
Absolutely not.
I wish I could. I don't have my notebook. I wrote it down as soon as those daggers were mentioned, which I think is like chapter 2, when they go to the house. I was like, and you learn that the uncle doesn't have magic. I was like, uncle is definitely doing some shady shit with these daggers. Like, and so it didn't take away from it for me at all, because it was totally about the characters and their journey. But I was wondering if anyone else guessed it.
Like when you get to sort of like the reveal and you realize there is someone, and then I have like a board of Guess Who in front of me, and all the faces on it are the characters that we've just been introduced to. And it's like, no. Oh, okay. Interesting. And that's, the uncle's there. And it's like, why? I like that. But I also don't want to try to predict. I want to let them tell me.
This time I wasn't. It was like chapter 2. It was like Chekhov smoking mystical daggers, where I was like, okay. And then, someone said, as soon as Abuelita told the story, it was like, okay. And I also as we were getting closer to the end, or like middle end, because I loved Jules so much as well, and just how full of life he was, and how he had come to, he has a temper. He is, he's got a lot of energy, and that's just the spirit version of him. But I loved that he was so accepting and not in a patronizing way, just very much matter of fact. And
I agree.
That helped Yad so much with that kind of acceptance, because his experience so far has been really fighting to be seen, fighting to be understood. And so we got a lot of those moments with them together. But as we're, especially as they're, both starting to share meaningful looks, and I love all of that. I was like, oh, these little cuties. But like I talked to my cats basically, but just these little cuties. But as soon as I really started kind of falling in love with them as a couple, as a concept, I was thinking, God, they can't just send him off, can they? Like to the afterlife. And I started thinking, well, it's if they're doing, there's other kids missing. Miguel is missing. There's this whole Four Dagger thing. And I was like, maybe he's caught somewhere in between life and but I wasn't even trying to figure it out. I was just in love with these little sweeties.
I want to actually go and extend your point that you're making, because that's something that I really wanted to bring up. And I would argue that Jules is the most important character in this book.
Yeah,
in the
a lot of ways.
Of educating, effortless teaching, and an example of what we should all be like. And I think that Jules's attitude, when Yads is perspiring or like in the middle of class going to use the bathroom, because even relieving yourself is an ordeal. And I think it's really important that we kind of, have that understanding. But the most powerful part for me was Jules being like, why not? What does it matter? Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And normalizing all of it. And when Yads is like, no, you don't understand. This is really hard for me. Well, it shouldn't. And it's like,
no one's here. So this is the perfect opportunity for it. And I think go ahead.
Oh, I was just in that moment. And it's not like it's in no way taking away from or minimalizing their feelings. And I think that's like Yads in no way was just like, no, but you don't understand. It's Jules going, no, I totally get it, but it shouldn't matter. And I'm going to support you. And I don't care. And I think by having like the bad boy of class and, this is the one that has the influence that people kind of look up to. You learn in school stereotypes. You learn what a reaction is supposed to be like according to society. And I think having someone like Jules who absolutely shits on what the stereotypical reaction should be, and he instead is so accepting and normalizing of all of it, is the confidence and encouragement that Yads needs to completely accept himself. And I think that if we can all just be a little bit more like Jules in that regard, and the fact that it was like, it wasn't even a big deal. And that's the great part, because I think a couple of these things was like, a little spoon feedy. But for me, it was like spoon feeding me when I didn't have a mouth to eat it. But in this particular instance, I felt like it was such a wonderful showcase of just who cares? Like if you're a man and you say that you're a man, then this applies to you. Then this is who you are. Then
go use the bathroom, bro. Exactly.
And they're like calling him bro and stuff like that, And then when they find out he's gay, he's like, I'm gay.
Yeah. And I do think when someone was saying too, that someone when you're going through your own gender identity, and I think this can, obviously there's this specific topic in this book, but I also love that it is about outsiders and wanting to fit in. And when you're young and your world is just school and your family and your friends, and your life has only been this amount of time, so everything feels like it'll last forever. And if you told me this when I was 15, I would have been like, fuck you, don't talk down to me. But like, it's true. And and so there's also this this freedom in, if you've lived in this life in this way, someone outside of it telling you, no, this is okay, or this is not okay, or all of those things. And the Dreamer Extreme agreed. That was when I was all in, when Julian wrote Yad's name in the yearbook.
I was just asking for that comment to be put up, because that's a perfect way of just like normalizing that moment where it's like the dead name was in the yearbook. It's like, oh, and like, Yads is freaking out, being like, oh my gosh, you're seeing witness to my dead name, how my school saw me, and now you know who I am. And so like, it's all out there, and it's just simple like, well, that's not your name. This is your name. No questions, no pity, no nothing. It was just like so normal. I loved it. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's another one that, sorry to cut you off. The Dreamer Extreme also said Jules is someone who sees throughout the BS, zero pretensions. No, before that, Yads didn't really need to prove anyone who he is, but he just needed to believe it himself foremost. Yes, and that's the hardest part. When people don't show that acceptance, when people are like, oh, sorry, I'm still learning, or I'm figuring it out. It's just effortless acceptance.
Yeah, I had to check myself a little bit when we meet Julian, because the way that the book started and we're learning about Yads's struggle with his family, I was like, okay, maybe the story is going to be about this in a big, meaningful way. And so when we meet Julian, and Julian is this bad boy, he's this very like masculine, like gangbanger cholo type of a Mexican kid in LA. I thought the story is going to be about how Julian is going to, over time, maybe
learn acceptance,
because that's what I thought it was going to be. And I thought it was going to be kind of tough to have this sort of story. And the fact that Julian wasn't, I had to check myself, and I was like, I don't know if when I was in the early parts of it, I was like, I don't know if I buy this. I almost felt like this is a little like, with what I know about awful stereotypes and, the sort of life experience that I had, or what I've seen in movies and television or whatever, I was like, oh, this seems a little. And then the moment got to the part where we met Julian's found family, his friends, and with the fact that they were all outcasts, and specifically it was like an LGBTQ like group of people that were taking care of one another, I went, this is brilliant. And I really commend Aiden Thomas I think it is so important that Julian is a very like masculine presenting gay Mexican kid in LA, because that's not a common, even just within Latino culture, even just that aspect, to be like, to be somebody like Julian, and to talk the way that he does and to carry himself the way that he does, but to be like, but I'm gay. I'm a boy and I'm into boys. Like that's what that character is. And then we had Flaca, and then we had all of the other supporting group that I went, this makes the most sense, I guess, for how Julian is the way that he is, while still being, again, the kind of like machismo sort of like tough kid, who people
who's got a temper and
who's got family issues. Absolutely. So like when that was the revelation for Julian's backstory, it really kind of clicked into place for me. Like Maude said, Julian may be the most important character in the story because of everything that Julian represents.
To influence our our main character. I want to point out there are a couple of really great comments too. And one which I highlighted, there's a really great interview that Adrian did, but the Dreamer Extreme says, I really like that Yad's dead name is never shown on the page because there's no reason it should. In the interview, Aiden Thomas says, a trans person's dead name is very personal and private. Usually it brings up a lot of bad memories and feelings. And it says, it isn't important because it isn't anyone's business. What's important are the feelings around the dead name, how it makes him feel to hear it, how it makes him feel about the people in his life who still use it, even if it's just a slip up. I want readers to connect to his feelings of displacement, disconnection, and rejection, whether they're trans or not. And I noticed that as well. And then also the scene, when they first go back to school with Jules, and they're at that table with Maritza's friends, and all of the girls are talking about all of these, even within their own community, all of these preconceived notions. And I loved that all of the characters really defied different types of stereotypes and really, challenged, I think, the readers to think more about even people, even us and Hector, you were saying that too. Like, there are obviously cultural norms, but they're not always correct. They're not always what you think they're going to be. And stereotypes like that, and how upset it made him, because I would just imagine if someone was saying all of the things that you're insecure, worried that people are going to think about you because you're not going to school, because you've had a hard life, because you're not, I loved all of his, the fact that he messes up all of those idioms and sayings all the time. I thought it was such a cute little quirk.
Yeah, it's very cute. It's very cute.
But it really, I'm just imagining being a ghost and listening to people say the things that I worry that people assume about me. And, I don't have I would just cry probably, but and really challenging that and having that that Yads and Maritza both know that he's there and know that this is just escalating.
Until the thing is moved,
and feeling
like the
terrible
movie Ghost.
about it.
I think that the book's strength is showing us Yadriel's and Julian's like perspective, and that we really feel what these kids go through, and we really feel, and even back to the point of the yearbook dead name moment, which is such a great moment. Like, even if this were to be adapted into a TV show or movie, there's ways you could still shoot that without even showing the dead name. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's like, even thinking about that and that kind of like storytelling, purposeful decision, like, gets me really excited and makes me hope that something like this or this could be adapted to then have a filmmaker like very smartly still show the scene and the importance of the scene in live action, but like, you will never on screen see the dead name. I think that would be such a cool, it's just like what Aiden Thomas said in the interview, like, you will never see it written because that's not what it's about. So yeah.
And I think, I would love to see, to your point of expanding the story for an adaptation, and folks in the chat are saying that as well. Like, you could easily make this a show and expand on those characters. I also, thought that Luca broke my heart as well, because that is actually a scenario that happens quite a bit when gangs are trying to recruit kids.
And also, I just saw the movie Luca on Disney Plus, so I was like, oh, Luca's so sweet.
I still need to watch. Speaking of,
very cute. It's very,
I'm
very
gonna
cute.
cry at that one just from Italy alone. But
not as much as Coco, maybe not as much as Coco.
Yeah, that's what I've read, but I will do that. I also really want to talk about the animals. Didn't the animals feel so real? I feel like sometimes animals don't. They're just like there, but I could like feel and the pit bulls too, because pit bulls get the worst rap and they're the sweetest dogs. And I just felt like I did notice the repeating certain terms, like the dog's tail hitting him in the face, but also cute. But I really did feel like the animals were like little tiny sub characters in there that showed that trust with Julian right away.
The cat was real cute.
Picasso.
Yeah.
How do you say it? But they said it so differently to Picasso.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Poracas.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an A in there? I think it was like oh man.
Picasso?
Yeah.
Picasso?
Like
it was like instead of like Poracasio, maybe?
Something like that.
Something like that.
That sounds very Italian. I want to talk about something. You have a question here in the outline here, Rachel, that I think is great, which is, because I have thoughts on it, which is, what did you think of the language? Were you able to immerse yourself in Yadriel's world? Were you able to follow the periodic shifts to Spanish? So I am kind of split on this myself, because I know that Maude struggled with it. She was texting us being like, I don't know a lot of these Spanish words, or we chatted when Maude, you came over to watch The English Patient. Terrible movie. Don't ever watch it.
Bad.
If anybody's never seen it, we didn't like it. But I struggle with it because I feel like in so many fantasy stories, the classical sort of prototypical fantasy that we think of as very European centric, and they have Elvish language and all these beautiful sort of made up, and they're based in like Celtic or Gaelic or Welsh or whatever those kinds of root languages are. All of the just the whitest, most beautiful people over there in that part of the world. And I feel like when fantasy will deal with like Latinx culture, that I almost feel like a sense of pride a little bit, where I'm like, no, you know what? Throw some Spanish words out there, because if readers are into Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and all these different stories, and they might not know all the words, but they'll like look stuff up, same sort of thing. Like, let's have readers kind of put in that effort. But on the other hand, I think that there are ways to, again, Rachel, you've seen it, Maude, you haven't yet. Even the movie Coco, I think, takes like concepts and words, specific words, Dia de los Muertos, Alebrijes, all these different kinds of things, and like is able to get it to you in such an organic way that it doesn't hinder the flow at all. And so on the one hand, I feel like, hey, if you're going fantasy, do fantasy, be fantasy. On the other hand, I'm going, but I want it to be accessible. And I definitely want people to be able to not have to stop as often as maybe they're stopping to look stuff up. So here's the solution I came up with. For future printings of Cemetery Boys, here's what we do. You turn the first page and you get a fantasy style map of East LA with all the locations, right? All the
So I actually looked
the
up to see if I
mountains.
could find
Yeah.
cemeteries
Yeah.
near Belvedere Park and like King Taco. Also, there are some over here closer. I'm in
Yeah.
East Hollywood, not East LA, but
Yeah.
right now where I live. But King Taco truly is amazing.
Yeah.
I think a map would be great.
It'd be awesome.
And I was looking at old cemeteries in that area to try to see if anyone inspired them. But Aiden Thomas is from Oakland.
Right.
So I'm sure there's a mix mashup there. And to be fair, I grew up around, I do not speak Spanish anymore. And I only know like basic words. It's sort of like I like assumed, I knew enough to kind of get most of it, but I still don't feel like there were moments where someone would say something in Spanish, but then it would be translated,
right.
somehow in the language. There were only a couple of times where I looked up words, but I agree with you, Hector, in that, if you're looking up words you don't know in the dictionary, or you're flipping back to a map, or you're doing things that you would do in a more Anglo-Saxon style fantasy story, then why not this one?
Then why not here? But again, I'm going, put a map of East LA and make it kind of fantastical, because this is a fantasy
it's
story.
A magical
It's a magical realism. And then also put a glossary, because a lot of those fantasy stories that we've read on this show, or the sort of classical fantasy lit, like they also have their glossaries in there. And I've got no problem with flipping back and forth while reading a story. If there's a glossary in the back to be like, ooh, what does that word mean in the context of this? So all I'm saying is Cemetery Boys is fantasy. Let's go full on fantasy. Let's make it a little bit more Lord of the Rings, you know what I mean? But that's,
it's what I liked about it was that it was contemporary fantasy, and that everything, there are brujos and brujas in LA that consider themselves that,
for sure.
If they're actually seeing Lady Death, that sounds amazing, because that description was so good. And then I had the ebook, and on the cover it's perfect. It's so good. I love the cover.
Look how cool she looks. This was another reason I thought I would love to see this live action,
100%,
or animated, or a comic book, something where you can really embellish and live in the physical description of the stuff.
Show me the two boys. Like I never really kind of associated. I just kind of built up my own sort of version. So on the left is that
Julian? Yeah.
Oh no, I did not picture Julian like that at all. Where are my dimples? Where are my dimples?
Look at Julian. He's so cute. Yeah, I know. Exactly. So, and then plus there's also just the added thing of like, if an adaptation were to happen, man, to go get some young like trans kid to play Yadriel and some like young gay kid to play Julian would be just the coolest. It would be so exciting to see some of that young talent. So anyway,
that's why I think it was so important that the narrator was a trans man, that, like hearing it in the actual voice of Yadriel, like I think was super, super important, and that authenticity. And, this is a thing so many times. It's like, it's just too hard. It's like, no, if you look, you will find, but you have to make the effort. Yeah. That's the hard part. Exactly. Stop just casting in your little circle of safety. Get out there. Yeah.
So I think Rachel kind of answered it earlier, but were you thinking TV show or movie? I know I normally
think the TV show would be really awesome, because because the story is so focused on these two cuties who I just want to tuck in my pocket, and I just love how the three kids were written. I really thought that they
Maritza as well.
Yeah, Maritza reminded me of a friend I grew up with, like pretty much on point, and just this very and I was very shy, and so this kind of like, and I also liked the dynamic of Maritza, rejecting some of her, heritage due to her beliefs and being vegan.
Right.
And there was just a lot of, I think, complexity in the relationships in terms of, Yads isn't like mad at her, but sometimes he feels bad that she could do this, but she could get accepted in this place.
Mhm.
And also the fact that, there's so many different experiences when you come out, and there are horrible ones, there are amazing ones, and there's this middle, not that it's not horrible and not that it's not very intense to go through, but even people who mean well, even your family that is trying, it's inevitable. I thought that was really well handled, and even at the very end when Yads is going through the ceremony, and Camila is back, and all of these things, and the acknowledgement that speech isn't going to change everything. It's not like all of a sudden his abuelita is not going to mess up or think the things that she's thinking, but they're trying. And the fact that the speech about change, even though it could easily come off as preachy, I thought that it felt really resonant, and that no, this isn't going to change everything, but this means so much that they're trying, and that it became about, again, Yads proving to himself, believing in himself, not just trying to solve this mystery, not because of Jules or because of his cousin, but because the whole point was that he wanted to be accepted, and it wasn't really about that. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think TV, because you could expand on all of the friends, you could kind of you could have it over maybe a slightly longer period of time, like throughout October as they're investigating.
Oh,
and
listen,
then
if it was a TV show, I would not open where the story opened. I'd opened with like a live Julian is in the show.
Yeah.
I'd open with
but
like
in the back, like you don't know
Yes.
him, but he's kind of bad boy in the corner.
Yeah, it would be
riding off.
it'd be Yadriel like barely interacting with some of the Julian's friends characters, but mostly about Yads and his life, and then like meeting the
8
parents and everything.
episodes, maybe 6.
I think for me, if the assignment was you got to make a movie and you can only give it to one writer, then I would say let's do it as a movie, because I think you can turn this whole book into a solid 2-hour. Let's focus on Yads and Julian.
You could do that too.
With all the fun side characters as a movie. But if the assignment was we can hire a team of writers, great writers room, I say 8-episode show. I say 13-episode show, and to give the challenge to those writers, expand all those other side characters. Expand some of the concepts, because I know earlier in the chat too, people were saying I really dug the lore. I was really interested in that stuff.
Me
because
too.
I know very little about the Mexican Dia de los Muertos that is kind of celebrated in LA. I only know from just my own life experience, but like I know next to nothing about the Brujex world.
Yeah, I don't me either. That was fascinating,
so
and
cool.
I thought it was made up for this book.
Yeah,
no, and the in that same interview, which I'll find and throw in the chat maybe.
It's definitely I don't want to say that it's not real, Maude, but like this book lives in a world where it's like, if there are Brujex and they really wield powers, what would that world be? If there really is a Lady Death, if there really is,
but they're based on saints and concepts and history. And I also really liked that. And I have to find this quote too, that, I can't find it, but that it's not just a Mexican, it's not a Latinx monolith. There are Colombians, Cubans, El Salvador, and so there are different elements to it, and to how you in real life, there are different stories passed down. It's an oral history. I also loved that the women are the bread makers because they're the healers. I thought that was really great. And a lot of, Aztec and Maya history they were a matriarchal society. But yeah, that's what's fun about it, is that, or at least for me, that it was magical. I love magical realism, especially set in LA, which is a very sub thing. But it made me want to, read more about it. And we can go a little over, but another reason I loved it, and I think I've spoken about this, but I took this great college class called Religious Approaches to Death. And I just find that fascinating because I know I'm a caricature of myself, but I do, because we're all trying to find answers to the same questions. What does happen when we die? Why does the sun rise and set? And so different cultures and science too is asking the same kind of questions. And so I found this really interesting to think about the what is it? The
Maligno?
Maligno, yes.
Yeah.
And that, they also weren't that worried about it because they hadn't really seen it happen that fast. So it's kind of like I don't know. I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads.
That's great. I think I hope to see more from Aiden Thomas, and I hope that I would just be very, very excited if this was picked up, and especially the writer's room aspect, because as great as the work that Aiden Thomas put down on this page, I would love to see a team of other Latinx writers with different, to come in and kind of, to flesh stuff out and to just expand what's already there. I think would be super cool. I can't believe you haven't seen Coco yet, Maude. It's going to be great.
Everyone said you'd cry.
Yes.
Like, ooh, you're going to cry. Ooh, you're going to cry. I wish because I don't just cry. Like I howl and sob. I have I scroll through those Facebook movies where it's like, this 3-legged dog. I'm like, oh God.
Oh,
yeah. So I just have
duck
to
lost its mom, and this monkey adopted the
no.
duck.
I
too much.
Can't. Animal videos. Certain award acceptance speeches. I maintain that Christopher Plummer accepting the accepting the Golden Globe for the movie Beginners, which is also amazing. But he thanks his wife.
Yeah.
And the way he speaks about her, I was at a Golden Globes view. It was 2013, and it stuck with me because I was like,
so romantic. That's so great.
They love each other.
The thing that always makes me cry is when I think about what Harry Potter named his son.
Stop it.
I just lose it when I think about.
No. Oh my
Sorry.
gosh. It would though. It would render my big thing is really lovely acts of kindness, whether it's helping a stranger, acts of kindness. I'm just like,
so here's what we're gonna do. We'll have everybody over to watch Coco, and I'm not gonna share it online, but I will secretly film you during the cry part.
Maude. Oh yeah, I'll cry.
And it'll be great.
I can only cry when I'm I need to see something. I don't think, or it goes for I'll go for 8 months, and then something will happen, and I'll cry for 8 hours. But yeah, if anyone hasn't seen Beginners, speaking of great coming out stories, it's got my husband Ewan McGregor in it, my wife Melanie Laurent, and Christopher Plummer. So
nice.
Also, Lisa Hill said that Aiden Thomas, his next book, Lost in the Neverwoods, is a twist on Peter Pan, which sounds awesome.
Great.
Ooh.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm going to read the
very cool
shit out of that.
Yeah, and Allie is asking, by cry part, do you mean the entire third act of Coco? Yes, Allie.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. Absolutely.
Black Belt said, would Harry name a pet Dobby Hedwig
Potter? That's pretty great. That's pretty messed up too, man. Dobby was like a human being, kind of. That's really great.
A pet.
Oh boy. Yeah, this was fun.
Any last thoughts on the book? Let us know in the chat. Well, we're gonna keep talking. Actually, we're gonna keep discussing. But first, we've got homework. So if you want to keep chatting with us, stay tuned for a minute from now when we share more info. But our next book is going to be Star Wars Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule.
Charles Soule. The High Republic, baby. This just came out in paperback.
It's me.
Yesterday.
It is
you.
That's
Maude.
I'm in it. I'm a Jedi. Yeah.
And then there's here's Rachel.
I was gonna.
right
Oh, I
here.
was gonna say I'm.
And that's me right
Chewy.
there.
I was gonna be Chewy, but is that a Twillick back there? Maybe I'm the Twillick.
A Twi'lek? Yeah, I think so.
It's
Well,
apparently
it's not
Twillick,
a single.
Oh,
It is
really?
a Twi'lek. Yeah, it's Twi'lek.
and I hate
I
it.
said
It's
I said
wrong.
Twi'lek for
It should
so
be-
long,
It should be twat.
Twi'lek?
and I
That's
got
weird.
actually, and I was like, oh.
This is just like an AT-AT is at.
If it's
But it's
if
like-
it's
I won't do it.
What's an
if it's
ATST, George?
what do you say for STST?
Exactly,
ATST.
George. What is it, George?
That's it.
No,
ATST.
no.
That's it.
That's it.
Guys, I have gone a little overboard because this is the first novel geared towards adults in the High Republic publishing line, and it, like I said, it just came out in paperback yesterday.
And
I
it's
also bought.
It's $5 on Kindle, and I don't know if it's Whisper Sync for Audible, but it's an affordable book.
I also got this book at Target. This is the first like YA book in the line. It's called
It's Claudia Gray.
Claudia
She's
Gray.
so
Into the
good.
Dark.
We love
Into the
her.
Dark.
We love her.
And then I got these two kids books, which they're all fantastic authors. I mean, Charles Soule, Claudia Gray. They have this great like team of writers that are putting together the High Republic. And I got A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. Justina Ireland, A Test of Courage, which is this cool kids book. And then I got this one just came out, Race to Crash Point Tower by Daniel Jose Older.
Ooh.
I'm excited,
You're
y'all.
ready to go. You're ready.
I'm ready
Cannon.
go.
Fire the
ready.
cannon.
to get into the High Republic, y'all. Let's do it.
Yes. So we're going to be reading that book for July, which means we will see you here Wednesday, July 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific. And don't you worry, I'm picking the next book. I'm picking on this book.
Okay. Good.
Spoiler alert.
If you know, you know. Like if you would
It's gotta
know.
be Cersei. I'm sorry. I need to force everyone to read Cersei so we can talk about it. And
No forcing here. No forcing here. And then over on Geek Bomb, we are going to be having that sweet after show. And to get access to that, you just have to be a backer of Patreon. Even the lowest tier gets you access to hashtag reading, where we talk throughout the month about the book for Nerdist. The first 2 Wednesdays of the month, I'm extending the Shadow and Bone trilogy that we did here on Nerdist. So if you were able to watch the first 3 books for that, I've been doing the Six of Crows duology, and now we're moving on to King of Scars duology, where we're talking about Nikolai, which is great. But if anything that you want to chat about this book and actually share and talk and ask questions, that's the place to do it in the after show. We've got an amazing book nerd community happening there, and we really have a great time talking about that. And I'm going to be bringing jelly beans. What?
Yum. Awesome.
Except the licorice flavor.
No, that's a hard pass for me, but I hope you enjoy them. Thank you everyone for joining us. I thought that this was such a fun book. I'm excited to keep talking about it on Geek Bomb. As always, you know where to find us online, but if you have suggestions, questions, want to talk more about books, join the Geek Bomb community, tweet us using hashtag Nerdist Book Club. We will see you here a month from now, and have a great rest of your night.
May the force be with you.
Always.